Hi, it's Seb. So first of all, I was thinking a lot lately just about this channel, just some general thoughts, and I think it's because I got like a bunch of really nice comments from like different people in different places, and I just thought, wow, this is really nice. Everyone's so nice. I'm really glad I started this channel. I just feel like I'm really enjoying BookTube in general right now. It's just like at this point, it's really positive in my life. There's no like stressy bits, and that's something great that I felt I should express and put on record in case there are other times when it's not. So yeah, thank you to everybody who watches this, and thank you to everybody who comments. It always really makes my day when I read the comments and then we interact and talk about books and stuff. It's great. Something that's not so great though is this book, The Performance by Claire Thomas. So I only read the first two chapters of this book, which is admittedly a lot as a book. It's like up to 60 pages or something, I think it was. Let's see. Okay, so I read the first two chapters and like a chunk of the third one. So I read about 60 pages, then I stopped reading it. And let's actually talk about DNFing just for a moment, because that's something that I don't do normally. So that's kind of like a big thing for me. Like I know it's just like a really normal thing that everybody who reads lots of books tends to do, and like I guess I do it. I just categorize it differently. Like usually when I stop reading a book, I'm putting it aside to read later, and I categorize it mentally as, you know, like a to be read book. I don't think of it as I'm giving up on this book at all, right? And I feel like that kind of makes me feel more positive about the reading experience maybe. And then even if I never get back to it, it's always just there like as a potential thing in my life. And it's very rare that I stop reading a book and decide not to get back to that book ever, even if I don't like the book, because I kind of feel like I can't judge the book properly until I've got all the way to the end. And I know this is just my little silly thing. I know it's like, obviously, read what you like, you know. But for me personally, when I'm not enjoying a book and I kind of want to feel that I've given it a fair chance. So I want to get to the end of it and power through, and then, you know, be able to make up my mind about it, knowing what happens. Because in this case, for example, I want to talk about the two chapters that I've read, but I kind of feel, oh, it's a bit unfair, isn't it? Because then I'm going to be talking about a book that I can't really speak about because there's so much that I don't know about, and like maybe some of the criticisms I have in the first two chapters are gonna, you know, like be resolved by the second bits of the book or whatever. But no, whatever, screw it. I decided, because I really disliked the first two chapters, and I felt I can talk maybe just about them. And also, like, I was looking at a lot of reviews online, and a lot of people said things that like it's kind of the same tone all the way through, like nothing. It's one of those books where not much happens. So yeah, I kind of feel justified as well. Not necessarily that the first two are representative of the rest. I don't know that. But just like I kind of feel like, okay, I think I know what this book is. I think I know what it's doing based on what I've read. So I feel okay about saying goodbye. I'm not going to read you, and I'm not going to have many regrets about that. And also I feel okay about ranting a little bit about it here on my channel. So let's go. First of all, let's just say how beautiful the cover is. It's got this, it's like the trees and the fire, and it's about a performance of Happy Days by Beckett, playing somewhere in Australia, and there's all these bushfires outside which are like kind of, you know, causing mass evacuations, and it's all in the news, and everyone's kind of freaked out about the encroaching bushfires, and they're all in the theater watching Beckett because life goes on. And the play Happy Days is, you know, there's a woman up to her waist in sand for the first act, and then in the second act she's up to her neck. So there's also this sense of, you know, I guess something terrible approaching is one of the things that's big in the play, and you know, it obviously matches what's going on in Australia, or in this town in Australia. So I just love that premise. The play follows also three different women who are all watching the play. And we kind of like understand their lives through, you know, what their thoughts are as they watch the play. And yeah, when I heard about this, I just thought this sounded amazing, like in terms of the premise. I wanted to see how it was explored. You know, like we're connecting the current state of affairs in society. We've got the climate crisis going outside. We've got art going on inside. We've got people who are, you know, consuming art. And at the same time, you know, the real world is happening outside. So there's obviously that sort of tension between like, should you be watching a play when the world is on fire all around you? And then, you know, like also seeing that reflected in the play itself. And all of that, those ideas were just in the premise already. And I thought that sounds great. And there's some books where I feel that the premise kind of does all the work and the book doesn't have anything left to say. And that's kind of how I felt reading the first two chapters of the performance. Each chapter follows a different woman. The first one is Margot, who's a university professor who's seen the play before. It was a long time ago. She doesn't remember it very well. She's sitting there, she's got a cough, and she's not really focused on the play. Like, she watches it for like a few seconds, and then she just starts thinking about her cough and how it irritates people. And honestly, the cough is like probably the most interesting part about her personality, because all the other stuff she starts to get into about her husband and her son and her students and all this stuff is just completely vapid and like kind of devoid of feeling. I thought it's just like kind of listing points in someone's life, and it doesn't feel like a life that I really connected to at all in any ways. And I thought, like, okay, maybe I don't connect to this character. Maybe something will happen with the next one. And by the end of the chapter, I don't think it's a spoiler to say because it's in the first chapter, but by the end of the chapter, we find out that she's a victim of domestic abuse, which is obviously like a very emotive thing. But even then, to me, I just didn't feel any sort of like kind of emotional like reaction even. It's just another fact like on someone's life map or something like that. I didn't feel like kind of any connection at all. Then we have chapter 2, Summer, who is an usher, and she's like also, because she's seen the play a few times now because she works in the theatre, she's gone in to watch it again, and she's not paying any attention to the play because it's her job, right? So we have two characters who are watching the play, and like they watch like a few seconds of it maybe, and then they think about something in their own life and they start remembering and just like basically describing their own life to us, the reader. And I just feel like that's not how people watch plays normally. Like, I kind of get it if you do it with one of your characters, like they're there in the theater and they're not actually like into the play, they just kind of, they're sitting there and they're thinking about themselves and their memories and their life history. I can imagine a person being like that. It seems like a bit of a sneaky writing technique to put that in there, you know what I mean? Like to pick that as your character. But I can kind of like just about, suspend my disbelief and be like, okay, maybe it was that kind of person. But for both, like 2 out of your 3 characters to be like this, to be like in the play and just thinking about themselves the whole time that they're sitting there, it kind of like makes you think, why is this even set in the theater? You know what I mean? Like, it's all super expository and just like inauthentic to the act of play watching. Like, it's not about, this isn't a book about theater, like you can tell, right? And it doesn't have to be, and it doesn't even have to be about Beckett, although again, the fact that it doesn't seem to connect with the play like on any meaningful way in the first 2 chapters, for me is like a big red flag. And I saw again in reviews, I saw lots of people say that one of the good things about this book, like people who liked the book, one of the things they did like about it was that they felt they didn't need any knowledge of the play whatsoever to enjoy the book. And I think that that could be a real strength for it if you connect to these characters. But also for me, it really detracts from it, because it's like, why does it even need to be a play? They could be watching a movie, they could be sitting in a park, it's like there didn't seem to be a point for it to be this specific thing. Now there were superficial connections, right? So the women will look at Winnie like buried up to her waist in sand, and then they'll see that she's putting on lipstick, and then the woman will remember putting on lipstick this morning, and she was like, when I put lipstick on this morning, it felt like blah blah blah, and then she starts remembering different things about her life. So it's like one tiny little detail of what's on the stage in front of them reminds them of their own life, and then they stop paying attention to the play and we're back in their head. So yeah, really like shallow connections to the play that they're watching. But play or no play, who just sits there and like thinks about moments in their past and in their present which show significant aspects of their personality, to create like a sort of little character narrative thing. It's just like, no one thinks this way, right? It's just like a completely inhuman way of thinking, and really made the characters feel super flat for me. By the end of the second chapter, it's kind of like building up to like a slightly greater connection to the play, because what was her name? Summer is like looking at Winnie, who's the woman up to her waist in sand, and like the last sentences of chapter 2 are this: the potential of an audience is enough, apparently, to sustain Winnie until the sun goes down. The simple and exalting possibility that someone might notice her impeccable daily performance. So in this chapter, we've learned that Summer is this anxious millennial, and or maybe Gen Z, I forget, but she's a young person, and she's always like performing her life for social media and whatever, and just like in general, she's very anxious about things, and she feels like she's always putting on a show for people, and she's inauthentic and blah blah blah. And so she feels that like, oh, this woman on the stage, Winnie, is also like kind of doing a performance. And then it's like, oh, the performance, you know. This also has a pet peeve of mine of having like that last sentence be like a one paragraph sentence, which I talked about, you know, ad nauseum, how I hate that. And it's the last sentence of the chapter as well, and it's one of them that's like, you know, trying to sound profound and putting the title in it, like, oh, the title has come up. It's like, you know what I mean, when people name drop the title, it can be really good or it can be really bad. And I just thought this was an example of it really sounding like it's trying to be way more meaningful and like jaw-dropping than it actually is. So Winnie, the character in the play, seems to be putting on a performance as a character, and then, you know, it's actually really a performance because it's a play. And then the character of Summer, who's watching it, her life feels like a performance to her. And then, you know, it's just like you've got a little matryoshka effect, but it doesn't feel deep to me. It just feels like, oh, okay, there's lots of performances going on, and what? It's like, there's what's the draw, what's the kind of the bit which makes me feel moved or which makes me feel interested, or, you know what I mean? Like, it's just pointing things out. Another thing which I think is a pet peeve of mine is this having like a young character who feels like they're written by an older person who's trying to understand younger people, if that makes sense. Like, I do think that Claire Thomas has a lot of empathy and sympathy for the young, and I think she obviously like has, you know, tried really hard to convey what it's like to be a young person, but it just doesn't work for me. Summer is queer and mixed race, which already kind of sounds to me like maybe that gets explored again later on, but in her chapter it didn't. It was just like a young person, queer, mixed race. Yeah, young people are interested in queer things and race things, aren't they? Like, it felt really like tagged on in a sort of storyboardy kind of way rather than like reflecting who she is as a person, you know. They're just like some extra identity markers because young people are all about identity and stuff, is what I felt reading it. But yeah, she's queer, she's mixed race, she's anxious, she's very anxious, which is, you know, like a lot of young people are very like anxious. But her anxiety felt to me like kind of just mainstream media talking points about millennial anxiety. She's anxious about her self-image, she's anxious about performative lifestyles on social media, she's anxious about the climate, of course. She's anxious about pornography, which I thought was kind of a weird one. And they even have a bit where she's talking about how 70s pornography from the 70s seemed so pure to her compared to pornography now, which obviously connects to body image and stuff like that. But completely missing were all the kind of anxieties that young people face that aren't usually media talking points, but that are so true to the young person experience. Like, she's not anxious about debt, she's not anxious about student loans, she's not anxious about the impossibility of home ownership, she's not anxious about suspicion and bias which comes from older generations towards young people. There's all sorts of things which young people are anxious about, which doesn't usually get represented in like newspapers and journalism, and that is also missing in this introduction to Summer. And that felt to me again just like a kind of a shallow understanding of, if you want to write about anxious young people, you kind of have to do a better job than this, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying you have to talk about all those points to talk about anxious young people. You know, like Sally Rooney's Normal People did a really great job of talking about anxious young people and making them feel authentic, you know. Like, it's just that these characters felt very like they'd been collated from newspapers and things like that. Like, it felt like they didn't feel like real people at all. And maybe, yeah, that is part of the point. Maybe Claire Thomas wants Summer to be like kind of representative of the young, and that's why she's got this kind of very you know, like broad emptiness to her character. So that was the state of mind I was in when I finished chapter 2, and I thought, okay, I'm going to start chapter 3. I'm going to at least give the third main character of the book a try before I give up on it totally. And that third character, we find out almost instantly, is this really wealthy middle-aged woman. And I was just, because of everything that had come with Summer, I was just like, oh, I'm out of here. Because I didn't want to read from that perspective. Since I hadn't connected to the university professor, I hadn't connected to the young person, I was definitely not going to connect to the wealthy middle-aged one. Even though like her wealth is introduced in a way which is sort of like critiquing that wealth because she got her tickets for free. So you know, she's kind of feels uncomfortable with the fact that she can go see this play for free because she has money. And then she's sort of like, society's kind of weird, isn't it? But the critique, at least from the few pages that I read, never went beyond this sort of really basic, you know, oh, isn't it messed up how rich people get stuff for free? And it could have got developed later on in the book, and that's something I will never know. Just like all the other things that I talked about, maybe they get developed and like kind of there's more depth, there's more connection, there's more humanity. But that's something I'll never know or find out. I will say that I read a little bit more of this book just because, as you can see, there's like this grey stripe like running down the side of it. So it's like, what's that? And if you go to that stripe, you can see it's actually like a play within a play, or a play within a book, and it's called The Interval by Claire Thomas. And so yeah, it's in the middle of the play, which the play obviously takes the whole length of the book. They have a little interval section, which is like written as though it's in a play. So it's like got, you know, like stage directions and stuff like that, and it's all like dialogue. And I see, and I've read a bit of that, and it seems sort of interesting, and I probably would have been like kind of more into it if it hadn't been for the fact that of what I'd already read, and so much of it was that like seemed like a good idea that went nowhere and that had nothing to say beyond like you know, what the idea was, what the premise was. So it was actually unappealing when I saw that. It was like, oh no, it's just gonna be like really gimmicky, isn't it? So I mean, I don't know, maybe it ties everything together, who knows, I'm never gonna know. Now, as a point of comparison, there's a book I finished recently, this one, Ponti, and in this book, it's obviously a very different book, but there is a scene where a character sits down to watch a movie, and in that scene, she like kind of stops watching the movie for a bit and starts thinking about her life and stuff like that. And that scene was actually really, really good. So I was kind of thinking like, why was that so good? And these two chapters that I read were not. And I think it's because the character, first of all, when she sits down to watch the movie, we feel like we're watching a movie. She describes the lights going down, and she describes the immersion of the story and the screen and the colors and the images. And there are like pages of her describing just the movie. So we feel like we're there with her watching the movie. Unlike in this, where they don't really talk about the play at all. Like I said, they just look at like the character's lipstick or whatever, and then they go off onto their reveries. So we get a lot of movie description. And then when something happens that makes her start reflecting about her own life, it's because she knows the actor who's playing the main part in the movie. So she's seeing someone that she met at one part of her life, at a different part of their life, acting in the film. And so there's something like very uncanny about that. And so obviously if you were watching a film which had an actor which was someone you know, you'd think about the real person as well. It would remind you of them, and you'd contrast the two things, right? So there's a lot of like reasons for her that are connected to her personality, to her past, and to the stuff that she's watching, which makes sense for her to go back into those memories. Editing said here, I forgot to mention that it's a horror film, so she feels like viscerally that she needs to look away from the screen at times when it gets too scary. And also, it's a horror film that she's avoided watching for like her whole life because it's connected to her past. So basically, she's just got this very complex set of motivations to look away or to not be invested in the film that's right in front of her. So like the connection between her memories and the actor and the woman on the screen and the woman that she knew in the past, all of this is written in a way which is really like immersive and compelling, and there's a sort of a stream between film and between thought, and then also between like the physical place where she finds herself when she suddenly like kind of snaps out of it and finds the movie has finished, which suggests that she's been like lost in thought for the whole thing. And it's all written in a really compelling way. And I just thought it was interesting that I read two things that did this kind of technique of have a character who just watches something and then starts reflecting about their own past and stuff, but one of them was done so well and the other one was done so poorly. And the one that was done well was done like in just a little bit, and the one that was done poorly was, you know, it's the whole book idea is that's as far as I can tell, that's what it's going to be. They're just watching and thinking and not really watching, more just like kind of thinking about themselves. And yeah, maybe it changes, maybe a lot of action happens. There is like a kind of an exciting plot point that Summer's girlfriend is like in danger of the fires, and so Summer's worried about that, and that's why she's not really paying attention to the play. But I mean, I don't hold out that much hope for that. So yeah, this is the first proper like DNF that I'm doing on this channel since I started this channel, right? And so it's like, wow, it's a big moment for me. It's an important book for me now, because maybe it's, you know, opening that Pandora's box. Because like right after I finished it as well, I DNF'd another book because I was reading Against the Clock by Derek Mann, and I was just like, you know what, I didn't like that one and I stopped it, so I could stop this one because I don't like it. So now who knows, maybe I'm never gonna finish another book on this channel. and that'll be the end of it. But if so, thank you for watching. First of all, I thought, oh, it's so short, why not just, you know, finish it and then you'll have another book done for the year. And I thought that's a terrible approach to reading. I'm not enjoying it, so let's just stop it. So now I'm like, you know, I've flung open the gates, and like, who knows how many books I'm not going to finish. But that's great. I feel cool about that. Maybe this is just a blip in my general reading style, or maybe this is the beginning of a whole new phase of me not reading stuff that I don't like. We'll see what happens. If you've read the performance, I'm sorry. I'm sorry if you didn't like it, that you had to go through that. And if you did like it, then I'm sorry for dissing your book so much. And either way, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on the book. And on any other books that you have stopped reading because you didn't like them. Or like just DNFing in general as a concept. How do you feel about it? I mean, obviously, I think everybody should just read however they want to read. And I think it's also good to, you know, experiment with new ways of reading and, like, you know, try things that push your boundaries and stuff like that, which is kind of what I did by stopping this book, and not only stopping about it, but then going on to talk about it and possibly making a fool of myself, because, you know, maybe the people who've read it will then watch this video and say, like, no, it's not like that, because if you just read the 3rd chapter, then blah blah blah. So you know, I've exposed myself to that possibility. But I think that's a vulnerability I'm okay with. So thanks very much for your thoughts. Thanks very much for supporting this channel in general. And I'll catch you in the next video. Bye bye.